John Quincy Adams. Most Americans know the names Washington, Jefferson, and Lincoln. But John Quincy Adams, the sixth President of the United States, is often forgotten. And that is a shame, because his story is nothing short of extraordinary. He was the son of a founding father, a boy who witnessed the Revolutionary War with his own eyes, a teenager who helped end that war through diplomacy, and later in life, a president who, after leaving the White House, became one of the fiercest voices against slavery in the halls of Congress. His life stretched from the very birth of America to the doorstep of the Civil War, and along the way he proved that leadership is about far more than holding the highest office in the land. This is the story of John Quincy Adams. Early life of John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams was born on July 11, 1767, in Braintree, Massachusetts, which today is known as Quincy. His parents were John and Abigail Adams, and even as a child, he was swept up in the tide of revolution at just 7 years old. He climbed a hill near his family's farm with his mother and watched the Battle of Bunker Hill unfold, the smoke of muskets and cannon fire filling the air. That image of sacrifice and struggle for freedom would stay with him for the rest of his life. When he was only 10, his father was sent to Europe as a diplomat, and young John Quincy accompanied him. Imagine a boy, barely taller than a musket, traveling across an ocean in wartime, carrying with him the hopes of a new nation. By the time he was 14, he was serving as secretary to the American envoy in Russia, and soon after he was helping negotiate the Treaty of Paris, which officially ended the Revolutionary War. George Washington himself once remarked that John Quincy Adams was destined to become one of America's greatest public servants. Education and early career. After returning to America, Adams enrolled at Harvard College, where he graduated at the age of 20. He became a lawyer in Boston, but law was never his true passion. His calling was public service, and he soon found himself in the world of diplomacy. Fluent in several languages, he was sent abroad again, representing the young United States in the Netherlands, Prussia, and later Russia. His skills as a negotiator became legendary. There is even a quirky detail about him that history buffs love to recall. He was known for swimming nude in the Potomac River at dawn, often around 5 o'clock in the morning. He claimed it was the perfect way to stay healthy and clear his mind. The path to presidency. By 1803, Adams had entered the Senate, and a decade later he had risen even higher. As minister to Britain, he helped negotiate the Treaty of Ghent, which ended the War of 1812. Soon afterward, he became Secretary of State under President James Monroe, and it was in this role that he reached the height of his diplomatic career. John Quincy Adams was the true architect of the Monroe Doctrine, a declaration that the Western Hemisphere was off-limits to European colonization. He also crafted the Adams Treaty, which secured Florida for the United States. By 1824, he was one of the most respected statesmen in America, and he set his sights on the presidency. The presidency. The election of 1824 was one of the strangest in American history. Andrew Jackson won more popular votes, but not a majority in the Electoral College. The decision went to the House of Representatives, which chose John Quincy Adams after Henry Clay. The Speaker of the House threw his support behind him. Jackson's supporters called it the corrupt bargain, and Adams entered office under a cloud of suspicion. As president from 1825 to 1829, Adams dreamed of building a national university, promoting the sciences, expanding roads, canals, and railroads, and strengthening America's infrastructure. He had a vision of a country united by knowledge, progress, and innovation. But Congress, controlled by Jackson's allies, blocked him at nearly every turn. His presidency was marked by frustration and political gridlock. Many of his boldest ideas were shelved, and in 1828, Jackson defeated him in a bitter campaign after the presidency. For most men, that would have been the end of their political careers. But John Quincy Adams was not most men. In 1830, just 2 years after leaving the White House, he did something no president had ever done before. He ran for Congress, and he won. For the next 17 years, he served in the House of Representatives, becoming known as Old Man Eloquent for his fiery speeches. It was in Congress, not in the presidency, that Adams truly found his voice. Abolitionist struggles. By the 1830s and 1840s, the issue of slavery was tearing the nation apart. Southern politicians pushed a rule through Congress known as the gag rule, which prohibited any discussion of slavery on the House floor. But John Quincy Adams refused to be silenced. Again and again, he rose to speak, sometimes shouting over those who tried to drown him out, insisting that the subject of slavery was too important to ignore. His persistence eventually helped overturn the gag rule, a huge victory for the abolitionist cause. In 1841, he stood before the Supreme Court to defend a group of Africans who had taken control of the slave ship Amistad. Adams, well into his 70s, argued passionately for their freedom. Against all odds, he won, and the captives were released. The final chapter. Even in his final years, Adams never slowed down. On February 21, 1848, while seated in the House of Representatives, he rose to vote. Moments later, he collapsed at his desk. He was carried to the Speaker's room, where he lingered for 2 days. On February 23, John Quincy Adams breathed his last, uttering the words, "This is the last of earth. But I am content." He was 80 years old, and he had given nearly every year of his life to the service of his country. John Quincy Adams's story is not one of easy victories. His presidency was troubled, his ambitions often blocked. But in the long view of history, his greatest achievements came after he left the White House. He became a champion of freedom, a man who refused to stay silent in the face of injustice, and a reminder that the fight for what is right does not end when you leave high office. He may not be the most celebrated president, but in his courage, his eloquence, and his lifelong dedication to the American experiment, John Quincy Adams stands as one of the greatest. If you've enjoyed this journey through his life, Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of the leaders who shaped our world.